Hey everyone, welcome back to a special video today. Before we get into all of the news, because we have a ton of stories to cover, lots of opinions to give, all this jazz, I want to remind you to enter our giveaway for Paper Mario, the Origami King. To enter, all you need to do is comment down below, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon. We'll announce the winner at the end of July. But let's get into it. We have a ton of Nintendo stuff here, a little bit of information about Xbox Lockhart as well, the supposed cheaper next-gen Xbox coming. But let's get into a lot of the Nintendo goodness first. And first off, you guys know about Joy-Con drift, right? Right, Joy-Con drift, it's been an issue ongoing since the launch of the OG Switch back in 2017, and it's still an issue that many of us are dealing with to this day. There's a class action lawsuit in the United States over it, and it's just not a good look for Nintendo. It is one of the worst hardware flaws I can really remember that hasn't been corrected this far into the Switch's life. Well, Nintendo has finally acknowledged it because they had their 80th meeting of the shareholders, and they did a giant Q&A, and it was addressed finally. Here is what was said. Regarding the Joy-Con, we apologize for any trouble caused to our customers. This was by Shintaro Furukawa, President and CEO of Nintendo of Japan. We are continuing to aim to improve our products, but as the Joy-Con is the subject of a class action lawsuit in the United States, and this is still a pending issue, we would like to refrain from responding about any specific actions. So basically, they might be fixing it, they might not be fixing it. They don't really want to talk about it until the lawsuit is concluded. So yeah, basically once that lawsuit's over, Nintendo will then go over their plans to potentially fix this issue moving forward. This would also explain why it hasn't been fixed to this point, because they're waiting for the result of the lawsuit, and I guess what legally happens in the US and what a judge determines needs to be done, both in terms of damages and to fix the issue. Even though the judge isn't going to be the one to fix the issue, they could order Nintendo to fix it. So it's one of those situations where we just kind of have to wait and see what happens. But at least he does acknowledge it, and that's the first time the president of anything with Nintendo has acknowledged the Joy-Con issue, so Joy-Con drift. So that's potentially good news for Switch owners down the road. It doesn't really change anything right now. All right, next up, we actually have a little bit of a jump away from the investors meeting, because we're going to come back to it, because Crysis Remastered ended up leaking a day early. Now, we already knew about the game. It's coming to Switch and all the other various platforms, but a trailer leaked along with some screenshots and all of that from a Microsoft store. And yeah, it's really cool because as you're seeing right now, this is coming to Nintendo Switch, and I guess this is a big deal for Switch because the Switch version is actually going to include an API agnostic ray tracing. This will be the first and maybe the only game ever on Switch to actually have some form of ray tracing, which is typically only part of newer hardware from NVIDIA or the upcoming Navi GPUs by AMD. Some of that tech is also going to be featured in the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, etc. But given that the Switch is rocking relatively old tech, 2015 by the way, and it's kind of low power compared to standards today, seeing any form of ray tracing, even on a software level, is going to be very interesting on Switch. We can only hope that the remastered Crysis game on Switch actually fares a bit better and looks a bit better than the Outer Worlds port did, because that did not look good at all. So yeah, all the footage you're seeing right here is from a PC version of Crysis Remastered. Now, some people are let down by Crysis Remastered a little bit because it's not the full-blown remake people were hoping. It's definitely the original game, just with better assets and stuff. But yeah, it's going to be on Switch. It's going to be on all the various platforms, and I can't really wait. The Switch version is what interests me the most, because I think mostly what you're seeing here on the PC is what you're going to see on Xbox One, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 Pro, Xbox One or Xbox Series X, or Xbox One X, I should say. Man, Microsoft get me all tongue-tied with those names. But yeah, I honestly think the Switch version is the most interesting of these, because ray tracing, while that's also going to be a feature on the other platforms, is something that I don't think any of us ever dreamed we would see any form of that on Switch. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. This next story is kind of a continuation of a prior story about how Nintendo Directs might be going away, but this time we have some official word from Nintendo, because they answered this in a Q&A session. You know, it says Nintendo Directs may be replaced, and it says, we feel Nintendo Directs are incredibly effective way to present information directly to our customers in a very straightforward way. Again, this comes from President of Nintendo Shintaro Furukawa. Inversely, times change, and so does the most effective way to promote products. So there's a chance that a new, better way to present this information comes about. So we always like to examine all of the possible ways to communicate this information to customers. And this is like, in addition to some additional comments, he said that they have other things to announce this year and they're going to find their own unique way to announce it. Basically sounding like there won't be Nintendo Directs this year. And at least a general one, that, you know, there might be another mini, but we haven't gotten a general direct since September of last year. And it's interesting that he comes out and admits that Nintendo Directs are incredibly effective, but they're looking into replacing them with something better. I don't know what could be better because everyone else is doing the Nintendo Direct format with State of Plays and Inside Xbox and all this stuff. So I don't really know. Maybe Nintendo plans to host their own event like PSX, so like PlayStation does every year, so maybe they're planning to look into something like that. I have no idea, but it definitely looks like the current management at Nintendo of Japan is not necessarily committing to Nintendo Directs in the long haul. They aren't gone yet officially, but there also doesn't seem to be any plans for a new one. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. And I think if Nintendo continues to see massive sales success by just tossing things out on Twitter and YouTube when things are ready, I don't know that they're going to feel like they need Nintendo Directs because the sales aren't impacted. So we'll have to wait and see. This isn't me saying boycott buying Nintendo games so we get Nintendo Directs. I obviously love Nintendo Directs. I think we all do. But yeah, it's interesting to see that Nintendo might be getting away from them. And now we have more official word that they're actually considering, you know, moving on from Nintendo Directs. So our next story deals again with the investors meeting, 80th investor meeting, and about how the COVID-19 pandemic situation is affecting things. We talked about how Nintendo previously said that it doesn't affect any of the releases in this fiscal year, but we have some additional details. And the director and senior managing executive officer Shinya Takahashi said that Nintendo has faced development delays due to COVID-19. But it will not affect upcoming releases. But in the future, if the pandemic continues, there could be delays of future development and releases. So basically, it's a confirmation of what we already knew, but just coming from another person at Nintendo, essentially saying, hey, look, we're going to get all the games, you know, all the games we have planned for this fiscal year, they're still coming. But after this fiscal year, if the pandemic's still going on, there's going to be delays. And it means it could be a very sparse year for Nintendo Switch next year. And people already feel like this year is sparse, and it could be worse. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. It's going to be interesting for all the platforms how this plays out, since we know everyone beyond this year is going to be suffering from game delays from all this work at home environment. It does slow down development of games. It's just simply put. This next story is actually quite interesting. It also comes from the investors meeting, and this deals with how Nintendo wants to extend the life of the Nintendo Switch. This makes it sound like the Switch is nowhere near done, but they don't really detail how they're going to extend the life, but they do explain why they want to. So Shintaro Furukawa says that the success of the Nintendo Switch can be attributed to two elements: the release of the Nintendo Switch Lite, which they feel like obviously is continued momentum for them, and that Nintendo can focus all development efforts on the Nintendo Switch and not two different systems concurrently. They want to extend its life cycle. So basically, the Switch Lite has helped extend sales and all that, especially when there was a lot of Switch Lite stock in Japan and not so much Nintendo Switch stock. And obviously beyond that, being able to take all the development teams and throw it at one platform has been a big boon for Nintendo. We've gotten like Animal Crossing and Pokemon and other games that we wouldn't normally get on a home console. We've gotten it on a home console now. So it's made the library more full and given us more consistent releases. It's interesting that Nintendo wants to extend its life cycle. That's not surprising. It's a massively successful system. It's peaking right now. This could mean that, if they see the Switch Lite as a potential boon that's helping extend the life, that a Switch Pro could be something that we're going to be talking about maybe even next year, because maybe the Switch isn't going to be done in 2022, 2023, and they plan for it to be a 10-year cycle, and it's not going to last 10 years without releasing new versions of the platform. And again, we've seen, PlayStation 4 Pro, Xbox, One X, potentially two different versions of the new next-gen Xbox. So I think that Nintendo is seeing a strategy here where they can release hardware iterations iterations and hardware upgrades and different forms of the hardware to extend the life while they continue to release blockbuster after blockbuster game. This could mean we are going to end up seeing a Splatoon 2 on the platform. We are going to end up seeing a Mario Kart 9 or something. It's going to be interesting because if Nintendo makes it a decade-long platform, they haven't done something like that really since the Game Boy days when they really expanded the Game Boy. Remember, they had the OG Game Boy, then the Game Boy Pocket, then you had the Game Boy Color, technically all part of the same family of systems that really made the Game Boy last a long time up until they released a new gen with the Game Boy Advance. So I do think that Nintendo is starting to view this as their new Game Boy, and they need to keep releasing better hardware and different hardware iterations to keep it going. And that's exciting news for people who own a Switch because it means you're going to get games for a long time. But people obviously worry how this is going to be impacted by the next gen platforms. And honestly, if they're releasing a Switch Pro and then maybe even one more iteration of Switch after that, maybe even the next gen Switch is really just part of the same family, it'll be interesting to see how that's handled. But yeah, Switch sounds like it's not going anywhere for a long time. Of course, they could say that and then literally talk about a brand new platform next year. You never know with Nintendo. So this last story is actually about Xbox Lockhart, the rumored or basically leaked at this point low-end version of the Xbox Series X. So you have the Xbox Series X, and then you have Xbox Lockhart, which is going to be a cheaper budget system. Probably won't have a display or any of that. And all this information comes from Brad Sams, an industry insider. And he says, one of the misconceptions about Lockhart is that it's going to hold back next-generation games. It's actually a valid concern, and the idea sprung up about a year ago when details were murky about the path ahead for the next-generation consoles. Specifically, developers were not fully versed in how development, or profiling as it's now called, was going to actually work on the hardware, which resulted in myself and others hearing mixed messages from those briefed on the early plans. As we have learned more during the past year, those concerns have faded, as Microsoft has built a strategy of using the same base components across both devices, like ray tracing support and CPU specs. That's right, the CPU spec in Lockhart supposedly is exactly the same as the Xbox Series X. That should make it easier for developers to target the same visual fidelity for both consoles, but at different resolutions. Meaning, the Series X will be optimized for 4K gaming, while the Series S is optimized at 4 teraflops for 1080p displays. And this really shouldn't be shocking, and it was interesting when people started worrying that next gen will be held back by this lower end system, because most of the games that are made these days also end up, well, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of the AAA games made these days, especially from Microsoft, also go to PC. And PC has to deal with a wide range of architecture, but one of the hardest things that you deal with is different GPU specs. If the CPU spec is the same, we know that there's going to be less RAM, but enough RAM. If they can just lower the visual quality for a lower GPU spec, I don't really see what the problem is, and it really shouldn't impact next-gen games. You shouldn't see visual fidelity held back on Series X games because of Lockhart, basically. It shouldn't matter. So that also brings in the question, could an upgraded Switch Pro potentially also get games if Lockhart can? I don't know. That's something to wonder. Can we get a Switch Pro that runs at 1.5 to 2 teraflops? I have no idea, because at that point then I think you can see further downports to Switch and further third-party support. But again, that's me spinning the story into a Nintendo story. This is really about Xbox and their expectations with Lockhart. And what's interesting is, beyond all of this, the original launch plans for the Xbox Series X and Lockhart are interesting, because Lockhart was supposed to release in October, whereas Series X was supposed to release in August. Now, due to the pandemic, that has changed, and I wonder, if they're still going to keep the staggered release. I think it would be smart for them to release the Xbox Series X first to go, head up right with the PlayStation 5, and then still release, say, Lockhart in the spring, even though some people are going to want that cheaper version right away. It's also one of those maintaining momentum things, and plus, they could see how things go head-to-head with Microsoft and Sony, and then all of a sudden, boom, we hit you with this lower-priced box. So it'll be interesting. We're supposed to see all this stuff revealed between July and August, so stay tuned. Anyways, folks, I am Nathaniel Ruppelgant from Nintendo Prime. I guess you can call this an episode of Prime News. I don't know. There was just so many stories that I could have made 20 videos today, and YouTube would have killed me, because you can't put that many videos up without negatively impacting your channel. So hopefully you enjoyed all this. Just a lot of information, blowing up your brains. Nintendo's doing great. 808,000 systems. Yes, 808K systems of Switch sold in April. Isn't that nuts? 400,000 something, PlayStation 4s, 390,000 plus Xbox Ones. It's been huge sales across the board for all video game manufacturers right now, as people are still, a lot of America staying at home during all of this and working from home and finding more time to game and all that. So yeah, I don't know. Thank you guys for tuning in. I am Nathaniel RoboGents from Nintendo Prime. Be sure to enter that giveaway, and I will catch each and every single one of you in the next video.